Okay, so hi, Uncle Norman. Thanks for doing this. And we'll get started with some questions for you. Are you ready to talk about your life?
All the time. I'm Arnold Bragg.
Perfect.
Uh,
All right.
let me just hit got it. Hold on. I got a message. I got it clear. Oops. Okay. Good.
All right. So we will start with an easy one. Where were you born, Uncle Norman?
I was born in Cleveland, Ohio on June 7th, 1925. And you know why I was born in Cleveland, Ohio?
Why is that?
Because my mother was there and I wanted to be close to her at the time.
It's a good one. And when did you move to Brooklyn?
I was about 4 years old when my parents moved to Brooklyn. Because my closest memory is actually 5 years on the second house that we lived in. I know about the first one because we have a picture of me in the hallway there.
Gotcha. But you don't remember anything about moving from Ohio to Brooklyn?
I was a child at the time.
Right. So it wasn't
4
very
years old. I didn't have much to say about it.
right. So it wasn't very hard for you.
No.
Right. Good. And anyway, moving on. So at the time when you moved, it was yourself, Nina and Martha, right? And my grandmother hadn't been born yet. Is that correct?
Nina was born.
Yeah, but and Karma was not born.
Karma was not born yet.
She wasn't born yet. And
No.
so once you started to become more aware of what was happening and you were getting a bit older, what did you really, what's one of your first fond memories you have of when you were little?
The earliest memories I have was when we lived in a two-family house. They rented, and I remember that there was an empty lot. Right now there's houses there, but at that time it was an empty lot. And I remember asking my mother, "Can I have a potato? I want to make a Mickey." You know what a Mickey is? You threw the potato into the fire, and it got burned, and then you ate it. We used to call that a Mickey. I remember we lived right across the street from the school, and I remember going to kindergarten. Why do I remember it? Because we lived across the street. When the class was dismissed, I ran across the street instead of waiting to go out in a group. I
Right.
remember the cop on the corner. I remember the school was still there. And I remember we had a lot of times in the school, in the yard.
Right.
And I vaguely remember going through into sixth grade before we graduated.
Yes. And what are some of your memories about school in that time? It was clearly very different from maybe some of my experiences in school.
Well,
And like what were some of your favorite classes, subjects?
in elementary school, I don't recall any favorite subjects. In junior high, I remember science. I used to love to go to science. You know, we had the departmental in those days. I don't know if I imagine they still have it. You know, you went from one to another. I remember that. Actually, no terrific memories as far as the learning goes.
Right. Right. And so you just mentioned the schoolyard. Like what kind of it's not like basketball was very popular at the time to play in the schoolyard or anything like that.
Handball.
Handball?
Yeah.
How does that work?
You never played handball? You hit the ball
Oh,
against the wall, bounces back, and you hit it again.
so that was the most popular game.
Supposed to hit it.
So that was the most popular game in the schoolyard?
Paddle like paddleball today.
Paddleball. Gotcha.
He has to stay.
Only in those years, we used our heads. There were two kinds of balls. There was a hard ball and a regular softball like you play. But we played with the softball.
Gotcha.
If you played with a hard ball, you had to have a glove because it was really a very hard ball.
Right. And that was your favorite game to play as a kid?
Yeah, well, it was one of the games he played. And as a bunch of kids, we used to play kick the can and Ringalivio, and it was good.
Yeah. Right.
Had a good childhood.
Yeah. And now more about your childhood. Well, since there was a lot of age gaps in your family between siblings, and I'm just wondering who do you feel you who were you closest to when you were growing up? Which one of your siblings?
I really don't recall being close to anyone. I remember that your Aunt Martha, I remember that she took me for my first train ride. And what was it? It was an old wooden car, like a railway car. And at the end was a gate. It was on a platform. And there was a conductor that opened up the gate. And we used to go in. You can see these things in the transport museum, in the subway museum here in Brooklyn, if you ever come. And there was long benches. Very few benches protruded out. Most of them were along the wall. And up on top were little swinging loops made out of metal that if there were too many people, you held on to the loop if you had to stand.
Right.
Okay.
And so my grandmother, when I interviewed her 6 years ago or so, she mentioned how you kind of looked after her as an older brother. Do you feel like you did your best to kind of take care of your baby sister?
That's the one thing that I feel very proud of, that I was able to help her out in the last years, and she was a wonderful woman.
Yeah.
Right.
But what about when you were a kid?
Yeah. What about when you were a kid as well?
When you were young? When you were young?
You talking about my mother?
No. When you were young, you used to, and Carmel said he used to look after her.
She did? I remember she was an infant at the time. I turned 5 years old. It was a big birthday. And grandma bought me this little cat pistol. And I shot it off in the house. And she started to cry. Carmel started to cry. So my mother says, go out of the house and play. She didn't berate me or anything. Just say, play with it outside.
Right.
It made a noise, it frightened Carmel.
Right. And further on to your parents, what are your fondest memories of your parents, like family gatherings, holidays?
Oh, it was always great, all of them. Passover was a special holiday, and it was a real Seder like you would probably have at your house now.
Right.
But it was great. And Hanukkah with the lighting of the candles was very nice. What can I tell you?
Yeah. It was a nice time to be with family, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Oh yes. Had a good family.
Okay. And so most of the extended family was also around, like in New York, right? At the time,
You're talking about my aunts and uncles?
your aunts and uncles, and
Oh, they were all over. We had in Cleveland, we had my mother's sister. Okay, that's Bryna, Tante Bryna, and Uncle Maya was her husband. In Rhode Island, we had Tante Sarah and her husband, Uncle Israel. Uncle Israel was a food peddler. Uncle Maya, he started a shoe business, which grew and grew. Eventually, they had about, I think, 5 stores. You know, the family expanded. They had 5 stores throughout Ohio, and eventually, for a very short period of time, they were on the exchange. It grew so big, but that went by the wayside. I don't know what happened with
oh,
that.
gotcha.
You know, and Uncle Tante Sarah and Uncle Israel, he was in the food business, and the sons all grew up. Sons and daughters all grew up, and they did very well.
Right. And so this is like a very a common thing probably for anyone who sees that your actual name, your legal name is Noah. How did you get the name Norman? How did it come to be?
Okay, my Jewish name is Neach, and my father had a brother here, Uncle Louis. He was in the delicatessen business, had a very good business, but he had a son, and he named it. He was born a little bit before me, so they named him Norman. Couldn't have 2 Norman Plotkins in the family, so they named me Noah. Yeah. One time I was in the hospital visiting someone, and I was in the elevator, and the woman's there with the child. She says, "No." I says, "Yes." She says, "No, I'm talking to my son." So I told her my name is Noah also. The kid looks at me.
So funny. Okay. Next, I know you worked with your father in the painting business,
Yes.
and I'm wondering how did that get started? How did you become interested in painting?
You want me to tell you that? I'll tell you. When I was 18, World War II was on. I never graduated high school. I got what they call a war diploma. I volunteered. I volunteered at that time. It was the Air Corps, not the Air Force. It was part of the Army. The Air Corps was having a lot of losses, and they needed men. And I volunteered for the Air Corps, and I was accepted. And I served my hitch in the service. I was there 2.5 years before the war ended. My behind belonged to Uncle Sam. He could do with it whatever he wanted, but fortunately, what he chose to do with me worked out very well. I didn't see any action or anything like that. I have a friend that volunteered that didn't volunteer. He was drafted. He was caught in, if you ever heard of the Battle of the Bulge, he was captured by the Germans. Charlie, with his background, he understood a little German, and he heard the commandant talking. And the commandant was saying, you know, the Americans started to get mastery of the sky, and Patton was coming with his tanks, and he heard them talking that looks like they're going to lose, and he understood. So my friend Charlie spoke to the commandant, and he said, in the broken German, whatever he could, that they should surrender to him and everybody there, and everybody will live. He was responsible for capturing 88 Germans.
Wow,
So
it's a great story.
yeah,
Um, and
Worthwhile passing on, and I pass it on to whatever I can.
and so so what year did you volunteer for the Air Corps?
It was when I was 18, 25 and 4 and 18 is how much? 43, right?
1943. And
Was
so in
43.
1941, Pearl Harbor happens. And
I wasn't 18 yet.
yes. So you were 16 years old during Pearl
Yeah.
Harbor. So
Yeah.
but what was your first reaction? Do you remember where you were when you heard the news?
Yes. When we heard about the news, I was in the kitchen with my mother, and I had a little radio. It wasn't television in those years. I had a little radio and I heard the news over the radio, and we were in shock. You know, everybody was in shock.
Right.
You know, but we had an inkling of what was going on with the concentration camps, but we really didn't know how much at that time. But we knew there was anti-Semitism there. That was another reason I volunteered.
Right.
You know.
And so the war ends in 45,
Yeah.
And you were discharged from the army, is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so then right after that, is that when you got into the painting business?
After that, I went to work. I had a few jobs. I worked here in Brooklyn for an automobile dealership. I worked in the parts department. Okay, that was I think almost 2 years. After the parts department, I decided to go out to California, and I had a friend, Lolly. He was an Argentine born, and we drove out. He didn't drive, I drove. So that was my first trip across country. We stopped off in Ohio. We saw relatives there, and kept going. And we saw a lot of things on the way. Not too much on that trip, but when we were there, we went down to Mexico. It wasn't too far, just across the border, and we went up to Yosemite. Okay, and then we came back. All right. When I came back, I while I was on a trip, I was thinking, what am I going to do with my life? And I conned your grandpa, my father, into taking me into the business. Yeah. So it worked out very well. He was a good teacher, and he was a good craftsman, because not only with the painting, small alterations we did, you know, the house that we lived in on 71st Street, that was a two-family house. Aunt Martha lived upstairs, we lived downstairs. It was one master bedroom, and then a living room and dining room. But the living room kept as a living room, and they had a sun porch. Nina and Carmel slept on the sun porch. In the dining room, in the living room, your great-grandfather, made a doorway to the upstairs apartment. So, and we closed off the door to the house, which was in the sun porch. It wasn't locked, we just didn't use it. And I used to sleep on a folding bed in the living room. When they had company, they would put me in their bed, and by this time I was, a young man. I was in my teens. I had been bar mitzvahed already, And I slept on that folding bed. When I had company, they used to put me to bed in theirs bed. When the company left, I took out the bed, opened it up, and that was my bed.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, that was before I went into the service. So when I came back from the service, great grandfather had fixed up the room in the basement. At that time, they had coal. No, I think he had converted to oil by that time, and he fixed up a big room in the basement, and that was my bedroom. That
Right.
was the first time I was alone in the bedroom. Other than that, I slept one time. I had to sleep in the same room as my sisters. I had my own bed, but we slept in the same room. That was on Cropsey Avenue.
Right.
So
And so all of this, like the shared spaces and the and just the very, you're all like very tight, close together. You had to sleep in the living room. Were you ever at all upset about that, resentful, or did you just
that's
understand?
the way it is. That's the way it is. It's the cards that we were dealt, and we played those cards.
Right. And did you ever think about, like looking back on it, do you ever think about uh, how the depression really affected your life in a
How
dramatic
what
way?
affected my life?
The Great Depression.
How what affected my life?
The Great Depression.
Oh, the depression. Actually, I was a child at that time. Don't forget, the depression was in the 1930s. I was 5 years old. I
Yeah.
didn't know about depression. My father used to work on a job. Sometimes he would work two jobs at one day. We had one of the neighbors was a painting contractor, not a close neighbor, but actually down on the next block. And they met in the paint store, like my father. This contractor used to do stores. When do you do stores? You do it at night, because during the day they have to conduct business. So he would work with one boss during the day, and quite often, not steady, but quite often he would work at night for Dave Sterling. So he would work actually two jobs in one day, two shifts. It was hard times. I didn't know it was hard times. I was too young to appreciate it, you know.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah. My grandmother said the same thing when I interviewed her. And now moving on. So you got out of the service, you get into the painting business. When did meeting your wife, Herda, really fix into all of this? When did that happen?
okay, I tell you, the guy I went across country with, Lolly, his wife's mother was a babysitter, and someone in my mother-in-law's family was a babysitter, and they got to talking, and they gave me grandma's telephone number, and they let them know. So I called up and heard her. I says, I'd like to get together. She says, well, I'm going to Sweden. Tell a young guy like that, he's going to Sweden, it means she's kissing me off. Go say goodbye. About a month later, my friend says, did you ever call that girl? I said, yes. I told him the story. He says, well, she really did go to Sweden. So I called back again, and that's when we got in touch. Best phone call I ever made.
And so then you went on your first date. Do you remember what you did?
I don't remember the first date, but pretty close to it. I went to what's the Jones Beach with her. I wanted to see the merchandise that I was dealing with. She wanted to. We kept going steady for that time. She lived in Queens near the bridge, Queensboro Bridge, and I used to travel from Brooklyn up to her, and you know, it seemed like a good relationship, and I proposed. It wasn't one of these proposals when you got out on the knee and everything. I proposed in the car. She was going to visit someone, and I proposed in the car, and she turned around and gave me a big hug and a kiss. That was the exception.
That's nice.
I thought so.
And what year did you get married?
We were married in 54,
1954.
September.
Wow. September 1954. And did you go on a honeymoon?
Our honeymoon was the second trip I made across country. But this time I made it with a good companion. And we stopped off. We left from New York. But for the first night of our marriage, we went to a hotel, and my friend brought the car up to me. He went back by my friend Lolly. He brought the car to me, and we went. Everything was prepared. We went cross country. We stopped off in Pennsylvania overnight, and then the next night we were in Cleveland, Ohio, and my cousin Sarah, who was the daughter of Tante Bryna, they were away, and she had told me to, because I told her I planned to be there, so she told me to use her house. So we did that. Then we went to Chicago. Through my wife's family, we had distant relatives there, and we didn't stay with them, but we visited them, and they told us where to go and to see things. From there, we went from one place to another. We saw national parks, Zion, Bryan, Grand Canyon. It was also the Petrified Forest. We had quite a bit, and we wound up in Los Angeles. Los Angeles, we stayed there. We were there for almost a year, and from there we saw different sites.
Wow.
Went to Yosemite's. We had a terrific honeymoon. It lasted over a year. Okay. So she worked and I worked, and we had good landlords. So,
Nice.
but by that time I was into painting, and I went to work. I felt I wasn't really a good journeyman at that time, which means a full-fledged painter. So I went to work as an apprentice. They were glad to hire you because they hired you at lower wages, and I knew different things. I did innovations there that today they use. I remember we had the temporary schools, and they had wooden steps, and you had to get in between the slats to paint. So we painted with a brush. I didn't paint with a brush. I took a stick and put a little rag on the end. I dipped it in the paint, and I did it either side there. Today, you got tools to do that. But in those years, they didn't have that. So it was good. And we saw a lot of things while we were there.
Right. And so so after your honeymoon, after your
Yeah.
honeymoon year, then you came back to New York.
Yeah, we came back at that time. Carmel came out.
Oh,
She drove back with us, and we stopped off. We at at the Grand at the Hoover Dam. You know, it was nice. We had been there when we went, but Carmel didn't see it. So when we stopped off there. We saw a lot of different things, and that's how we came back. Stopped off. I mean, it was there. We stayed with her. You know, so it was good. We
right.
had it was a very good trip.
And so then after a few years, you became a father, and a parent, and
As a matter of fact, the boy I became a father of yesterday was her birthday. It was
wow.
his birthday yesterday, the second. Okay, today's the third, right?
Yeah, today's the third.
Yeah.
3rd of October for anyone watching later on, 2021. Forgot to mention that. And so what did you try to teach your kids as a father? How did you try to parent? What was your strategy?
That you have to ask them. You know what I did with them? What I did with everything, the best that I could. The best that I could. If I failed, it wasn't for lack of trying. But
Right,
whatever I did, in any endeavor I did in my life, I tried to do the best that I could.
right. And what's your favorite part about being a father, grandfather, great grandfather?
I had kids to smack around, you know. No, it was good. It was being a parent is a responsibility, like anything in life is a responsibility. But I uh, I got pleasure from them.
Right, right. Um, and okay, moving right along. So by the 1960s, the late 60s, there's a lot going on. There's a whole counterculture movement. There's a war in Vietnam, and the Black Panthers are really coming up. Civil rights. What was your position on what was going on at the time, like kind of the craziness in that time in the 60s?
Listen, every age has its way. In the 20s, they had a big change in the culture. Cultures change constantly, you know. So I really don't recall anything special.
Really? There's nothing you can remember, no protests or I don't
No,
know, positions you
it
felt.
wasn't like today. Today, somebody looks at you cross-eyed and you protest. You know, it's ridiculous what's going on today. You know, uh, we. I went to work. I came home and did what I had to do. That's all.
Right. And what do you what do you remember about like some important historical events at the time, like Martin Luther King Jr. Being assassinated? Do you remember the
When I'm
that day
sorry,
was like? Yeah.
when Kennedy was assassinated.
Oh, I was asking you about Martin Luther King, but Kennedy is also a good one.
Okay. I felt that the they had a just cause. There's no question about it. But what happened with them was great. Was what with the blacks, they were here as slaves. My contention is, who made them slaves? Washington didn't go over and go capture slaves. There was other African Americans that made them slaves. And they deported them. That was the export. Of course, this is my present day teaching feelings, to be honest with you. And they have to go ahead and do what they can do. I had a couple of African American guys working for me. The last one, Richard, we were close friends. We were more than a boss and worker. We were friends. I have his picture hanging up on my refrigerator door. You know, he married a woman. She had a daughter, and the husband, her first husband, first guy that was the one that was her father. She never heard from him. She raised his daughter. She got a responsible job in Wall Street. She got her education and she paid her dues. Whatever it is, you have to pay your dues and go ahead.
Right.
You know, there was slaves here. The Jews were in Russia and Belarus, where my parents came from. They were like slaves there too.
Right.
Today they don't call them slaves; they call them essential workers. Okay. If you have the abilities to go ahead and to make yourself better, go ahead and do it, but not because of background.
Right.
The opportunity is here.
Right. Okay. My next question, maybe an easy one or a tough one. I'm not sure, but who is your favorite president of your lifetime?
Oh, Roosevelt, hands down.
Why?
Why? First of all, he pulled us out of this Great Depression that we had in the 1929, 1930s. He instituted Social Security, you know. He didn't originate Social Security. That was something that was in Europe already in certain countries. But he instituted that so that people like me in my old age, they have a certain amount of income coming in. We may not need it, but it's a good background, goodness thing that we shouldn't have to worry in case anything big comes along.
Right.
You know, he instituted what Biden wants to do today with the infrastructure. All these major highways that we have today were put in the 1930s under Roosevelt. He made the country what it is today. And they talk about taxing the very wealthy more than they should. One of the, I forget who it was, one of these billionaires, he says, I pay a smaller percentage of my income than my secretary does in taxes. And he felt it was unfair too. But the thing is, the infrastructure with this industry also helps the wealthy people because it makes it easier for them to do their business, you know. So enough of the lecture.
All right. Next, well, you might have covered this, but I wrote it down anyway. What is your favorite place that you have traveled?
America.
America?
Yeah, we went to, besides seeing the United States the way we did, we went to Bermuda. All right, it's part of America, but we went up to Alaska.
Bermuda's not America.
Alaska isn't.
Alaska is,
Yeah, you said Bermuda first.
and I know,
Okay, just
then
checking.
I brought it into the wrong part of the
Okay,
conversation. we were in Hawaii, so it was a good life. No regrets.
No regrets.
No.
That's good. Okay. Here's a question for you about the modern day. What about the world today has surprised you the most?
I guess the internet,
The internet.
Something I can't comprehend. Mark would like to kick me in the behind to get me to do it, but
Yeah, it is pretty crazy.
it's very bad.
It's bad.
The internet is something that is a terrific thing, but anything that has ever been invented for good in this world, there are people around that use it for bad purposes.
Yeah,
Anything.
it's true. So I called my mom to ask to see what I should ask you. And she was mentioning that you've been interested in poetry. And I'm wondering what draws you to poetry and yeah, and like just tell me a little bit about it.
Me to it, but I like to rhyme things. See, when your parents' anniversary comes out, I'll give you one. This probably is my favorite one. You love the meal, you love the show, you love the cruise on the ocean, but you too have something that's stronger than love. That something is called devotion.
That's nice.
Mark on his anniversary, Mark and Steffi, and he's going to get it again on his next anniversary.
Oh. And did you start liking poetry and writing years ago, or is this been more of a recent thing?
After I retired, it's not recent, but it's after I retired. Hurt and we volunteered for this organization called Elder Plan. It's like an HMO today. So they had a bulletin, and they used to print, if you had something to say, they used to print it. And every once in a while, I would write something, and they would print it in the bulletin.
Right. Okay, I only have a few more for you, and then you can get rid of me.
It's a pleasure to talk to you.
I'm glad. So you're very famous in this family for your sense of humor, for your jokes, and I'm wondering how did that come about? And have you just always been the funniest guy in the room?
How it came about, I don't know. But my feeling is this: if you don't laugh, you're going to cry. Much better to laugh. Much better to laugh. So keep a sense of humor. It's very important in life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Cool. Next, I only have a couple more for you. So with I don't know how to phrase this question perfectly, but with the state of Israel, I think is a very important thing to a lot of Jews. And I'm wondering, well, first off, have you been there?
Yes, that's one of the trips I made with Herda.
So, but what was your feeling when you went on that trip? And what are your feelings about Israel now?
I felt good about it. I think that Israel might put a a little hand forward to the common people in the Gaza strips and all that. This is my feeling. I don't know, maybe they can't do it, to offer them, things that will make their life easier.
Right. But in
Since
when
they vaccinated everybody in Israel, I wonder, did they offer the vaccine to the people in the strips? I don't know if they did.
I don't know either.
So that's the type of thing I'm talking about. And it's too much war,
Yeah.
and they're accomplishing nothing.
Right. But back in 1948, when Israel declared independence, how did you hear about it? And when did you decide, hey, I actually want to go and see this place?
I imagine all the time afterward that I could, it was part of my heritage.
Right. That's it? You don't have anything else to say about it?
No, not really.
Okay.
It was nice to go there and to see and everything, but the politics are what turned me off.
Right. Makes
Too
sense.
too much.
Okay, I only have the last two. So the first one is, if you had to tell me in any of the next generation, your grandchildren, great grandchildren, like something, some sort of lesson, like how you want us to live our lives, like, or any sort of advice, what would you tell us?
Well, I told you already, keep a good sense of humor. Do what you can to improve yourself and to improve everybody else. And not only look out for yourself, but to the degree that you can, look out for those that can. Don't bankrupt yourself, but tzedakah, one of the Jewish tenets, is very important. It's very important, but not only among Jews. You have to give to other things. Like I give to the Bowery Mission because they take care of the homeless. These unfortunate people, for one reason or another, they're homeless. I'm sure it's not a choice.
Right. Right. Good. And then my last question for you is, it's 100 years from now, and someone mentions your name, they say Norman Plotkin. What do you want them to say about you? What do you want people to be saying about you years from now? How do you want to be remembered?
But I told you before, he did the best that he could. And if he failed, it wasn't for lack of trying.
I think that's a perfect way to end it. Thanks so much. I'm going to end the recording now.